welcome to the Sacred Feminist Podcast,
Hi, Shruti.
also known as Bitches and Witches. This episode is going to be a
Indeed,
discussion
indeed.
of witches and the witch wound, but this is an informal discussion. Our disclaimer is that we are not historians. We are just modern day witches who are trying to have a discussion from a feminist perspective on what a witch is, what it means to be a witch, and what the buzz term witch wound is, what it means for us, and what it might mean for you. My understanding of witches is to take a brief step back to Adam and Eve, which we're not going to get into because there is a whole video I have made about this that you should definitely check out. It's called How to End Blame, and that will explain the entire chain reaction that Adam and Eve has had on our society. But my understanding is that we have a woman named Eve who was blamed for the fall of man, and another woman named Lilith who was supposedly Adam's first woman who did not want to be blamed or to be less than Adam. And so she was vilified and became the first witch. And this, from my understanding, was because she was standing in her power. She wanted to be equal to Adam. It wasn't necessarily because she was casting magic spells on him. It was simply because Eve became the good woman and she became the bad woman. So this is another topic I talked about in the Witch Wound video, where women were split for the first time into two categories: good women and bad women, Cinderellas
Submissive,
and witches.
not
Again,
submissive.
you can check out the Cinderella Syndrome video or the Witch Wound video for more in-depth detail on that. But that is my understanding of where the first origins of witches came from, is whether or not this is really your myth or whether or not this is your religion. There was an origin point where the first division in society occurred between good women and bad women, and witches are always on the side of the quote unquote bad woman, the woman who is casting some sort of spell or practicing some sort of magic, which you could also say is a form of religion, um, that is somehow not the Catholic, Christian, or mainstream religion. From a feminist perspective, you could also say that that would be the masculine perspective, toxic masculine, and this witch perspective would be the divine feminine perspective. So obviously, this has been vilified as it's been passed down through history, because we all know that witches is sort of still this term that carries a lot of negativity around it, which really surprises me in this day and age from what I've seen, especially online in spiritual circles, the tarot community, spiritual communities online, how much negativity there has still been around the word witch. Like, people do still use the word witch kind of in the way you would use the word bitch, as almost like a derogatory insult or a way to say a woman is nasty or mean or practicing some sort of ritual or magic that would hurt you. I think the idea is that witches, you, you you're sort of afraid of witches.
I was just going to say it's said in a fear-based way.
Right. Like, I think you said, Amy, that you were terrified of the Wicked Witch when you were younger, just from that movie Wizard of Oz. And that's a really good
Oh, many,
example
many
of,
nightmares ensued.
well, that's a good example of how the new Wicked content is sort of trying to kind of break down that division between good witches and bad witches. So good women and bad women, because the other witch, what is she? Glenda?
Glinda's the good witch.
Yeah. She's kind of Cinderella. She even like sort of is usually dressed like Cinderella. That kind of pink, um, diamonds encrusted gown and tiara. So, so it's interesting that there is that division, not just for witches, but just like for women in general. There is, um, in a lot of feminist theory, there's the discussion of how people who are oppressed have like a split consciousness of like seeing themselves in this very um, dual natured way, because you're sort of taught to internalize that you part of you is bad if you're trying to be oppressed. Going back to this whole being blamed for bad things happening, you like really internalize that. So the women having such a harsh division between good women and bad women, witches and Cinderella, kind of sets the stage for a division of any oppressed group of people. So this witches uh, thing is not just about some women with crooked noses and like stereotypical black clothes cursing you at night with cauldrons and brooms. It's really about the beginnings of oppression itself. And I do think that it has a lot to do. I mean, we talk about it as if religion or spirituality is somehow just this category. But Amy, you and I both know that when you have a spiritual awakening, it's every category of your life, it's every part of you. So calling a woman a witch for being spiritually awake or powerful or, standing in your own spiritual power, that's not just some kind of insult that affects one part of your life. That's like, um, right, that it basically is oppression of your whole life
Of
to
a
say
way of
that you're a
life.
witch
Sure.
because you know, you're awake, and it is powerful to be in contact with the spiritual side of yourself. Um, I mean, it is oppressing someone's religion. I mean, there are people who consider witchcraft a religion. Um, but if you are broadening that beyond just maybe studying potions and runes and things like that, and you're including any woman who's been called a witch for doing anything that even remotely looks spiritual, you're basically talking about using it like the word bitch or other words that are used for racist slurs. Anytime a woman does something you don't like, you're essentially attacking the spiritual side of that woman. I mean, so that is kind of what the witch wound is. Like, it's this part of, first of all, women, because women are the ones who get called witches. It's the fear of being branded or labeled in that way for appearing to be spiritual, or it's spiritual in a way that's not mainstream. Put it that way.
And there's also this huge misconception, which doesn't take into account these women who were accused of witchcraft in many, many, many cases were actually landowners. Their
Oh,
husbands had died or passed away. They found themselves in possession of land, which at that time was the most valuable thing. And so, how do you take someone's land? Oh,
yep,
well, you accuse her of being a witch. And then often that land went to either the nearest family members, or it might actually go to the government and be absorbed into that. So a lot of what took place with the accusation and the frenzy that followed around many of these cases were actually money, greed, power, and land based accusations in which allowed their belongings, their property, their inheritances to be legally taken from them.
Yep. I think we actually watched, so you and I watched this Gaia special on witches that I
Yes, we did.
forget the name of. Um, and
I
there
think it was
was a
just called
case of
Witches.
that where they were saying land was stolen, but it wasn't even by the family, it was by like neighbors who just wanted the land. So they called the ancestor of this person in the documentary a witch, killed her or had her killed, and then took the family's property,
Yeah.
which would make sense since I don't think at that time women were really supposed to be landowners
Even then,
property.
it was up for grabs, apparently.
Yeah.
It didn't take much besides an accusation. And we all know how accusations and gossip and
Yeah.
rumors fly. And isn't there an expression like everybody loves a good witch hunt?
Yeah, it's
I think that's a saying.
it's part of our like
It's the crowd mentality
yeah, I'm not even sure that
goes
we
into
like
the,
consciously understand how pervasive that is like in our minds. Like just saying a phrase like witch hunt, we don't necessarily always think back to like how sexist and oppressive that is to use all these terms. Kind of the same way that we're like waking up to using the word bitch and taking that word back. And I know I'm always very careful now saying that word. And when I was younger, people were not careful. So I do think things have sort of begun to change, but the the level of I think fear still around the word witch and witches is really shocking to me based on like what decade we're in, what year. So I've seen tarot readers online be afraid to use that word or call other women witches in a derogatory way. Even though I think just the act of using tarot, the mainstream would still call you a witch for doing even just that, which is also surprising and upsetting. I think you and I both use the tarot and know that we don't cast spells on people when we use the cards. I mean, spiritual awakening in general awakens you to a universal life force. And when you're using any tool, whether it's tarot or just your intuition or any anything you would call a spell, you're always tapping into that universal life force, which is always, very high vibrational positive energy. So the idea of having the tarot be some kind of tool for witchcraft is really surprising to me.
everything is energy at the end
Right,
of the day. And really, it just has many names now where a new age spiritualist might say, well, that's manifestation. Then someone else might say, well, no, that's a spell. And someone else might say, no, that's just quantum physics and how energy works.
right.
So many vast different ways of looking at the same results, which is we can shift and change things around us through our intention, our will, movement of energy, energy and motion, which is our emotions, which are the most powerful way that we move energy and interact with energy in with people and the things around us.
I think that also there's the idea that maybe a spell is something negative, maybe because it's so associated with witches, but I think there are plenty of positive things you could call spells that are again this tapping into energy.
Yeah. So if you say a mantra
Right,
or an affirmation, that is in essence a spell. Words are spells
right.
because they shape, shift, and direct intention and your will and the energy around you.
This kind of reminds me of a way I was explaining blame being a noun versus um, actual energy being a verb, and the difference between basically something that is an object, which is a noun, and something that is alive and moving and is a verb. It's an action. And that's kind of like what energy is. Energy is not an object. It's sort of always in motion. It's something you can't really quantify. Um, at its core, the way you can say this is a rock, this is a tree, this is a some object. So I heard a very interesting feminist author talk about spirituality that way. So rather than saying, men versus women or us versus them or whatnot, she just said, okay, well, there's spirituality as a verb, or there are all these labels that become nouns, and like this old world that we're moving away from, which is where all this oppression and sexism and categories exists, is this objectified world. But actual spiritual truth is a verb. So we're all these constantly changing, evolving, verb centered beings. I mean, even the word being is a verb. We're human beings. The act of being. Sometimes people use for like meditation purposes, which is, as you know, supposed to connect you with your own energy and the energy of the universe. So it's an easier way of describing that distinction between um, not just spiritual truth, but also kind of the goal of a feminist spiritual awakening to move away from an objectified, category based world. You know, instead of labeling things witches and spells and whatever label you or category you want to put on them, deciding if it's, something stale, unmoving, objectified, or if we're moving more towards a world where we're allowed to be fluid 3D, 5D beings. I
I
think
also want to
that,
bring up, oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I
No.
was going to just bring up a point about, I was thinking about that word spell and even tying into feminine sexuality, how that's been sort of referred to and is a little bit of that power that women have over men,
Mm-hmm.
right? She put a spell on me,
Right. Yeah.
right? Because we're in that sexual allure,
Right.
or that sexual power, right? Love potion number 9. And
Yeah.
there's a sense that, a man is, um, unable to resist, and has to succumb to that, that feminine spell if she decides to turn on the seduction.
Yeah.
So that's also like a variation on that idea around being a witch and having spells cast on you
Well, I think
and
also
that fear factor of there's
yeah,
power there. There's
well, I think
raw,
sexuality and
sexual
power
power.
and beingness are all interrelated. In fact, I kind of think they all come from the same core of um, who you really are, which is more of an energy source than it is flesh and bone that is temporary. Women's power source is so linked in with both spirituality and sexuality that you kind of can't unlink them. And I think that the toxic system has tried to label women as a certain way, tried to make it like tone it down, tried to make it safe, tried to make it stale, and um, ultimately to make it something like forbidden.
Well, even women's cycles and times of the month
Yeah.
have been vilified and made to seem like they're dirty or gross or something that you shouldn't talk about or that you have to hide or be embarrassed or ashamed about, when really the sexuality ties into creativity in that the creation of life, right? Being the gateway for these souls to come down into physical incarnation. What more powerful thing is there than that?
Right. Well, that's the problem, is how powerful that is. I mean, women are the givers and the gateways to life itself. So I think there is, at the end of the day, just another power play going on that unfortunately is like some, it's still more exciting for some reason to people and more interesting than just actual just love, which is kind of the actual source of all of this, the source of the universe, the source of our being, the source of, the real equality between genders, between any person, between any living being. The fabric is love, and power is just like this 3D obsession. Um, but I think love is so powerful that the only way to, like, it baffles me how you can't see that sometimes and instead flip into the mindset of just labeling someone as a name like witch and then, shunning them from society or even harming them. I know that's probably the most troublesome part for me in modern day use of the word witch or any type of label is, especially when you're dealing with someone who is very high vibrational. So, the good witch. How do you still quantify someone that way, label them as a witch, and overlay all of those basically just words onto them that have this loaded historical meaning when the fact of the energy of the person could be very different than that. They might not be practicing, you know, negative spell work at all. So, an example would just be seeing someone read the tarot online and calling them a witch without actually watching what they said in the video, or a tarot reader calling another tarot reader a witch when she's doing the same thing. I think that's the part that confuses me the most is, shouldn't we be reading for energy more than just listening to labels that we throw back and forth?
We love a good label.
Yeah, I mean, it creates drama, it creates gossip, creates, the witch hunt. Maybe that's more exciting. I think it's exciting as long as you're not the witch.
Indeed.
We were talking a minute ago about how there are, only a fraction of star seeds are even high vibe enough to access certain information or abilities that they might have been sent here to do. And, you know, it troubles me a bit that the more high vibe you are, the more at risk you are of being labeled a witch, for example. Um, it could be why there's a smaller percentage. It could be part of the barrier to, especially a female starseed's awakening. I know in my personal journey, I've been um, not always super open about reading the tarot or talking even about my spiritual journey with the wrong crowd, precisely because there's still so much conventional pushback.
So I hear that from a lot of clients that come in readings and their intuition is sharp, it's on, or they're scared of it. And they don't necessarily tell people that they know things or have dreams and things happen or know what someone's going to say before they say it. Those things are a little risky. So often people are sitting across the table from me in a reading and they're having that witch wound come up where there's fear. And I can tell by the conversation, it's not just the fear from that immediate situation. What will my partner think of me? What will my friends and family think of me? It goes deeper than that. It's this ancestral piece that's come down in the DNA from mother to daughter to mother to daughter, on and on down in the generational line of all of their trauma around fear, accusations, for so long it was not okay to let anybody know if you had what they would call the gift. Like
Yeah,
you kept that to yourself. It wasn't safe. Um, and just on the low key end of being like ridiculed or made fun of, by anybody that you might tell, as they say you're crazy or they don't believe you or they think you're making things up or you're just weird. So
yep,
there's still stigma, even today, just for regular women like you and I moving through the world, and their intuition is being activated, turned on, heightened because we are in ascension. That is what is happening across the planet for everyone in their own divine time, of course. But it's happening, and I'm seeing women in fear of that. They're in fear of their own intuition, their own intuitive abilities, their own psychic information that's coming in. And whether or not they trust it is one thing, but then the second piece is they might trust it, but they might not be trustful enough to share that with others. It might be something that they keep more to themselves, for sure.
yeah. I know for me, there's two things. There's A, trusting your own intuition if you've never been taught or if you've sort of picked up intuitively that it's like you might be called crazy or I think you internalize a bit of the crazy stigma even if you're not intuitive. So there's trusting yourself and then there's daring to share that information
Mm.
with anyone else.
And this is a flip side of the witch wound, which is if you voiced that you were, or, shared that you were hearing voices or receiving information, you might not get to be accused of a witch and burned or hung or drowned, but it is very likely you might be taken away in a straitjacket
Yeah.
and pumped full of medication and hospitalized for the rest of your life. And I've also dealt with clients that have been through that trauma in a past lifetime
Yep.
and then they come into this lifetime learning, having learned and knowing that it's not safe to share or verbalize what you're receiving, or
Yeah,
that
they
you
would
must be
give you
crazy if
like a
you're receiving those
lobotomy.
types of things.
Like they would surgically remove part of your brain if they which they could do if they decided you were insane and then you don't have rights basically and you end up essentially in prison. I mean, it's not like you can check yourself out of
Yeah, and all it might take is a doctor's signature, a
Right.
small, push or coercion from, whoever might be the guardian who had to sign off, the family member. And again, are they inheriting the money, the land, the property, the houses, the things?
Right.
So,
Did you ever see that series called The OA?
yes, yes, I love that show.
Um, because there were parts of that series where they tried to put her away. They did put her into I forget which season it was, but they put her into a insane asylum because she was
Hmm.
trying to explain about how they were jumping across timelines and lifetimes and realities and dimensions. And she voiced it. And then, I mean, I believe one of the characters intentionally did that to keep her from uh, fully activating her mission. But that was a form of oppression. Was okay, she's female, she's talking about all these different dimensions and timelines, and
That we don't understand, so it must not be
all
true. So
right, so
she
we don't
must be
understand that,
crazy.
we can't see it, so we'll just sign on this paperwork, take away all her rights, and at the end of the day, make her a prisoner. So it's, I mean, that's a modern show. I mean, there are a lot of modern shows where that storyline will kick in about a woman being put into some kind of insane asylum when actually she's not insane. Always a female character.
And I believe there's many people today that have been misdiagnosed with mental illness that are actually natural mediums
Right?
and other types of abilities where they are hearing and seeing things. So it's an interesting, it's an
Yeah,
interesting topic.
I've been, I don't think because I've seen therapists, and I don't think I've ever gone into any kind of intuitive information in those sessions. I mean, I could almost just hear the diagnoses flying.
Mm. I've had a
So,
couple of clients that have had therapists who were empaths and
okay.
who understood that and had actually like referred them to me
Yeah.
because they recognized they were probably an empath and maybe needed a little more direction, help, assistance, what have you, due to the nature of being sensitive to energy and understanding that energy work can help that.
Yeah, well, I've said in the past, and I'll say again that the work that you and I have done together has been kind of on this borderline of like therapy and energy work, but like also therapy for being an empath in
Mm.
general, or an
Yeah,
intuitive,
it's
because
spiritual
it's
therapy
confirmation. I mean,
for sure.
you go through the world trying to intuitively. I know from a young age, I sort of learned to hide it. I remember um, learning in math class. I knew the answer on the end of one of my math exams, but there was only a few minutes left on the bell, and I didn't have time to show my work. So I had this choice, like, do I put down the answer that I know is right, and I don't know how I know it, and get accused of cheating, which I didn't, unless you consider, pulling math answers out of the ethers to be cheating, which I suppose it kind of is. But
Not if you go to Hogwarts.
so yeah, I'm a Hogwarts student, and I'm like, do I? Because I didn't take the answer off of anyone else's paper. Anyway, I ended up putting it down and got lucky because the math teacher did call me in after class and did say, you can't just put the answer down, circle it, and have no work and like have it be the right answer. And she just assumed that I did it in my head. And I was like, cool. But no way I could do this in my head, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just never going to do this
Little did you
again.
know I was casting a
I'm
mathematical
like, did you
witch
know that I just
math quiz
pulled
spell.
it from in the air over there? Yeah, so I didn't do that anymore. But that was sort of kind of like one example of like, you know, am I going to sit there and tell my math teacher, that I just know? She's going to be like, no, you just know because you
Yeah.
either looked at your,
And that's an example of even as a young person learning and understanding that you have to dim your light
yeah,
to make others comfortable or to survive in this society
or at least just, not be
or
honest.
conform.
Yeah.
Just fit in with with the status quo.
But there are a lot of times, whether it's a test or not, where I'm getting intuitive help and I'm unable to truthfully say what's going on with me because, again, back to the witch wound, I'll look insane. You know, people will just think I'm weird. There are certain situations where it's like super inappropriate to do that. Like, for example, a math test or a lot of these like really rigid, hierarchical, structured environments, the medical environment that I wanted to go into at one point. I mean, any kind of therapy. So I'm surprised that, I mean, you're lucky if you can find a therapist who is an empath and who will tell you that
Yeah.
in
I
a
get asked today,
session.
one of my clients asked if I did life coaching, and I said I do, but I call it spiritual mentoring
Yeah.
because it's all channeled.
Yeah.
It's like channeled life coaching, basically.
Yeah.
And sometimes those sessions are more powerful than, 10 years is spent in talk therapy.
Yeah.
Um, it can be
Well,
pretty
especially if you're
miraculous.
also, lying, essentially. I mean, I'm not saying you're lying because you're malicious, but even just like the small lies of omitting how intuitive you are, where you're getting information from, if you're hearing things, if you just know things, all the clairs, clairaudience,
Mm,
clairsentience, all of them are prime uh, categories for craziness.
yeah.
I think a
I used to
lot
have
of
this
people are
joke about
learning.
this because back in 2011 it was when I opened the sanctuary.
Yeah.
And back then I was behind the desk all the time, and as well as doing readings and Reiki and classes and mentoring. But I'd be in the shop and I would giggle because people would walk in and they're kind of like, come in and they're like, I can't tell anybody. I think I might be going crazy. I saw an angel out of the corner of my eye. And we'd have a chat about it. And then they'd leave. And 10 minutes later, their next door neighbor comes in. I can't tell anybody. I think I might be going crazy. I heard my name called in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
We chat about it and then they would leave. Then the mother-in-law comes in, 10 minutes later. I can't tell anybody. I might be going crazy. I'm like, if you would all just talk to each other, you would know you're all going through the same craziness.
Well,
It's the intuition being opened up, the ascension symptoms, stepping into using more of our brain than the 8 to 9% we've been using. So I used to laugh when people would say there's no such thing as psychic ability. I'm like, really? Do you know what the other 91% of your brain can do? We don't. So I really think a lot of what I'm doing and what you're doing is we're accessing different areas of our brain than most people are used to. And I have trained my brain to not only be able to receive that information, but I trust it now pretty implicitly when it comes in. Yeah.
yeah, that's why that's kind of why I wanted to start doing a podcast like this, is to have more discussions like this be a little bit more open. Um, even though it's kind of a good way to do this on the internet because you can kind of watch any kind of content privately. And that's kind of the way the tarot online has been starting to kind of gain traction, is women like you and me get on who are readers and we can sort of read publicly without having to be right in front of all those people. And all those people who were maybe had like a subtle curiosity or were too embarrassed or didn't talk to their neighbor can like go on there and watch videos privately. So it's kind of my hope that like the more we talk with each other and also just have conversations like these be public, we can like start chipping away at the witch wound or at least
Yeah.
make it.
And it has come a long way since, when I opened in 2011, when, every person walking in the door was like literally like looking over their shoulder before they would divulge any of what had been happening to them. And now it's very much uh more out, I would
Yeah.
say, where people are walking in and they're at ease and they're comfortable because they're in a comfortable environment walking into the sanctuary. They feel the high vibration. They smell the sage burning. They immediately feel and at ease, sort of stepping in. But so they have a safe space where they really feel a little more comfortable to be themselves. But also, I back in the day, so when I first opened, I was doing mainly tarot mediumship readings and Reiki. And I would say Reiki and people would be like, Reiki, what's that? Is that who they would literally say? Is that hoodoo voodoo? They'd be all sort of like, Reiki, I don't know about that. And then to try to explain what Reiki was even more awkward and weird. So, so and challenging. But nowadays I say Reiki and it's like, every person is like, oh, I'm a Reiki master. Oh, I got Reiki yesterday. Oh, my brother does Reiki. Everybody knows what Reiki is. And same thing with a chakra. I used to mention a chakra and people would go, what's that? What's a chakra? And now you say chakra and they go, oh, I got my solar plexus balanced in yoga yesterday. So I find that more and more. And here's the great news that I'm excited about. It's not just women that I'm hearing that from. It's the men.
So we're going to pause the discussion here for tonight, but be sure to check out parts 2 and 3 coming up in the next 2 weeks. And don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. And if you want to contact me or Amy, you can check out our websites. Amy is at
The Sanctuary Cape Cod.com, or you can come down and visit the shop on Cape Cod, Brewster, on Route 6A and Massachusetts. The number is 508-362-8000. And Shruti, if they'd like to get in touch with you, how
yep,
can they contact you?
yep, you can check out meetshruti.com, where I also have my book, which I would recommend reading. But more than anything, definitely check out the intro video on this website, How to End Blame, because it will explain to you all of the foundational principles of sacred feminism from my perspective. We will see you guys next time.